So if you remove parents from that equation and you have sharks out there in the annals of history, we'll look back at this time and say those people were crazy.
Nigel Farage has recently re-entered UK politics and is facing a major election on the 4th of July. Do you think that if Nigel does well in that election, that could be a good sign for Donald Trump ahead of November?
Well, I've had a chance to sit down and interview with Nigel a number of times, and, he's a good conservative and he's a disruptor, very much like Donald Trump. So I think the two of them would work very well together.
He is campaigning on the issue of immigration in the UK. We've seen massive amounts of both legal and illegal migration in recent years. Immigration is set to be a huge issue in the US election as well. How is that impacting everyday Americans today?
Well, first of all, there's the safety issue. We don't know who is coming into this country. We do know that there are those in places like Iran who want to destroy us, who think that we're the great Satan. And why wouldn't they be taking advantage of an open border? Why wouldn't they be sending their operatives in here and planning something? If they weren't, they wouldn't be very good terrorists if they weren't doing that. So I suspect that they are. But also, it affects the general safety. It affects the economy, people taking jobs. And a lot of these countries are emptying out their prisons and their asylums and say, well, free pass, let's let the Americans take care of them. It really just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if a country doesn't have sovereignty as far as their borders are concerned, how long can they last?
The issue of immigration impacts all Americans, but there's been particular focus on black voters recently. The Biden campaign have accused President Trump of being racist and sort of being desperate to try and court back black voters. How do you think this issue of immigration will impact the kind of black vote in America?
Well, you go to a city like Chicago, which has a large black population, who are told that we don't have money to take care of your needs, but these illegal people will put all their needs on the front burners. We'll give them a place to live. We'll give them vouchers for their expenses. All these things are very irritating for people who've been there the whole time, who've worked, who, donated their blood, sweat, and tears to the well-being of the community. And all of a sudden, who cares about them? Kick them to the curb. I think people are resentful of that.
Do you think that in 2024, this time round, more African Americans will vote for Trump than in 2020?
Oh, there's no question about that. It's just a matter of how big the margin will be. But, African Americans are no different than all the other Americans. They all feel the same pain when they go to the grocery store, the same pain when they go to the gas station, when they open their mail and they get those utility bills. And that affects them. They all feel unsafe walking in the streets of downtown or even in their own neighborhoods. These things have an impact. They all are embarrassed by the fact that we're a laughingstock amongst the world leaders. Nobody wants to be in that situation. I don't care what their ethnic background is.
I'm going to read you a quote from Jasmine Harris, the director of Black Media for the Biden campaign, and I want to get your response. She said, "We sure haven't forgotten Trump repeatedly cozying up to white supremacists and demonizing black communities to his political benefit, because that's exactly what he'll do if he wins a second term." What's your response?
I say that's just propaganda. And of course, what do they always do when they have nothing else to talk about? Racism. That's our go home message. We got to come with that one. That one should rouse people. But I think it's sort of like the kid who cried wolf too often. People aren't paying too much attention to that right now. They know what's going on.
Some conservatives in the US are focusing on the issue of so-called anti-white racism through DEI initiatives. That's where, for example, a white person might be discriminated against in terms of college admissions or in job applications because they're not a minority in some ways. Do you think this issue of anti-white racism is real and a significant problem in the United States?
Well, DEI is certainly a problem. What we really should be thinking about is liberty and justice for all. Two wrongs don't make a right. There's no question that black people and many minorities were discriminated against in the past. I don't think anybody disputes that. But to discriminate against white people now to make up for it makes absolutely no sense. That's just going to drive us further apart and create more problems in our society.
Obviously, your background is in medicine, and I want to ask a bit about Biden's health. Recently, there's been some videos of him kind of mumbling and talking gibberish. I don't know if Americans use that word. But how do you assess Biden's health?
Well, all you have to do is look at videos of him over the course of time, and you can see he is declining rather rapidly at this stage. And what people should be thinking about is who are the people who are propping him up, and why are they doing it? And do they care more about gaining political power than they do about the safety of the country? I mean, this man has the nuclear codes. He's responsible for the military. He's responsible for the safety of the American people. Really, would you want this man to even drive the school bus for your kids? Give me a break.
Do you think he has a strong chance of winning re-election in November, despite all of the issues? Because Trump remains quite.
Well, let's put it this way: there is a machine in place where you can elect a rock, which you just put it in the spot, and that's something that needs to be dealt with, particularly with the mail-in balloting. The French outlawed routine mail-in balloting in 1975. They said there's just too many opportunities for mischief, and you can't control it. And we have the same situation. We have a situation in 2020 where at the last minute, officials were coming up and saying, signatures don't have to match. The address doesn't have to match. There can be 100 ballots from the same address. It's okay. We don't want to disenfranchise people. They don't have to have any kind of ID in order to vote. That's ridiculous. That's depriving people of their right. And then afterwards, they said, well, maybe some of those things were wrong, but it wasn't enough to affect the election. That's what they always say. But obviously, this is something that has to be paid close attention to, because the will of the people is thwarted when you allow election interference to occur.
Sticking on the theme of healthcare, what do you think about attacks on parental rights when it comes to children transitioning? I know that we've seen lots of debates in various states across America as to whether children or the parents ultimately have the say as to whether they're able to transition or not.
Well, let's put it this way. When fertilization occurs, the brain starts developing immediately, and it continues developing right up until your mid-20s. And that's the reason that parents are there to protect children during their vulnerable period. So if you remove parents from that equation, and you have sharks out there who have other alternatives, other motives for what they're doing, we place children at a very great disadvantage, and that's what's happening. And a lot of those children who get involved in these transition programs commit suicide or have severe bouts of depression and anxiety. We're not doing them any favors. And I think at some point we will come to realize that. I suspect in the annals of history, we'll look back at this time and say those people were crazy.
Do you think that this will become a major issue in November and will help Republicans in places like Virginia, where Glenn Youngkin has done very well campaigning on this issue?
I think this will be one of the many issues. I think what we really are dealing with is common sense. Do we want to do things that make sense, or do we want to go off on ideological tangents that will only be in place for a short period of time but cause a lot of damage in the meantime?
Do you think that adults should be able to have life-changing surgery to so-called transition themselves? I know that some conservatives argue that this goes against the Hippocratic Oath, that this is basically affirming mental illness, and you're kind of chopping off various bits or doing various bits of surgery, which can only harm them. So do you think it should be available to adults as well as children?
I think adults can do what they want to do. I really do not ever want to get into the area of legislating morality. I think this is an area where we should have open discussions and make sure that people understand the facts. But when we start trying to control their behavior, I think we're going down a very slippery slope.
And finally, talking about the healthcare system in the US more generally, can you assess how well the healthcare system is doing and what kind of impact healthcare as an issue will have in November?
Well, obviously it's a big issue. What do you have that's more important than your health? But we probably need to be looking at some better ways to do it. In the United States, we spend $13,100 per capita on healthcare each year. That's a lot of money. Concierge practices generally don't cost that much. So the real question is, what are we doing with that money? Where is that money going? What do you need for good healthcare? You need a patient and a healthcare provider. Along comes the middleman to facilitate the relationship, and it becomes the main entity controlling both of the other entities and taking most of the money out of the system. We need some reform in that area.